Guess who's featured on the 100 most influential people in sport, according to Time magazine?
Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, for his work with the Invictus Games.
At least pretend that you didn't know.
You are trying to catch me out on every topic this week.
Because there were other
Weddings,
people
children,
in
protocol.
the royal family who are involved in sport in a playing sport sort of way. So I find it quite interesting that he's doing it because the Invictus Games?
Yeah, entirely because of the Invictus Games. And we always speak very highly of the Invictus Games and Harry's passion for it. And actually, we saw that in person ourselves when we were with him in Ukraine recently. So I wasn't surprised to read that. But I think, if you're going to talk about 100 most influential people, I would have thought someone like Harry would probably be in the list somewhere. And this was specifically for sports and the rehabilitation that he's done.
And there it is. A moment that many people probably did not expect to hear from the very place where royal commentary usually lives, an acknowledgement that Prince Harry's recognition actually makes complete sense. Because after playing that clip, the thing that stands out is not just the fact that Prince Harry has been named among Time's 100 most influential people in sports. The bigger story is the reaction. Chris Shipp, who has followed royal stories for years, did not dismiss it. He did not try to twist it. He did not search for some strange explanation hidden under a mountain of royal protocol paperwork, because apparently humans invented entire filing systems just to avoid saying, this person did something impressive. Instead, he said what many people already knew. Prince Harry belongs on that list. And the reason why is simple. The Invictus Games. This is not about a title. This is not about a palace balcony. This is not about who is standing where during a ceremony. This is about impact. Real-world impact. The kind of impact that happens when an idea leaves the person who created it and becomes something bigger than them. And that is exactly what happened with Invictus. When Prince Harry created the Invictus Games in 2014, the goal was never just to create another sporting event. The goal was to change the way the world saw wounded, injured, and sick service members and veterans. Because for a long time, many people looked at injured veterans and only saw what they had lost. They saw the injury, they saw the trauma, they saw the difficult moments. But Invictus said something completely different. It said, look at what they can still achieve. Look at their strength. Look at their determination. Look at their ability to compete, inspire, and overcome. And that message has reached people all over the world. That is why this Time 100 sports recognition matters. Because when we talk about influence, what are we actually talking about? Are we talking about having millions of followers? Are we talking about appearing in headlines every day? Are we talking about being famous because people argue about you online? Because if that is the definition, then congratulations, the internet has successfully made chaos a career path. Humanity really looked at attention and said, what if we turned this into a full-time industry? But true influence is different. True influence is when something exists because of your work, and it continues to help people. True influence is when an idea creates opportunities for others. True influence is when people who may have felt invisible suddenly have a global platform. And that is where Prince Harry's work with Invictus stands. The Time 100 sports recognition places him among people who have shaped the sporting world, not because he scored goals, not because he won medals himself, not because he was an athlete competing in the games, but because he helped create a movement where athletes who were often overlooked became the center of attention. That is a very different kind of sporting legacy. And it's actually fascinating watching the conversation around this unfold. Because for years, we have seen certain sections of the media try to frame Prince Harry as someone who only has relevance because of his royal background. But then something like this happens, a major sports recognition comes along, and suddenly the conversation has to move. Because now the question is not, why is he famous? The question becomes, what has he built? And that question changes everything. Because the Invictus Games have become bigger than a royal project. They have become an international sporting event. They have become a place where competitors share stories of resilience. They have become a reminder that recovery is not always about returning to the person you were before. Sometimes recovery is about discovering who you can become after everything changes. And that message is powerful. This is why Chris Shipp's comment is important. When he said, "I think, if you're going to talk about 100 most influential people, I would have thought someone like Harry would probably be in the list somewhere." He was basically acknowledging something that has become harder and harder to ignore. The work speaks for itself. And that is probably the part that frustrates some critics the most. Because criticism is easy when you're talking about image, popularity, or headlines. But when the conversation turns to actual results, things get complicated. Because results have a very annoying habit of existing. You can debate opinions, you can debate personalities, you can debate who likes who. But it becomes much harder to debate the fact that Invictus has helped change conversations around adaptive sports and veterans. The athletes themselves are the proof. Their stories are the proof. The continued existence and growth of the games are the proof. And that is why this moment feels significant. Not because someone handed Prince Harry a compliment, but because recognition came from outside the usual royal bubble. The sports world looked at what was created and said, "This matters. This belongs here. This has influence." And that is something worth talking about. Because Prince Harry's journey has always been unusual. He was born into one of the most famous families in the world, a family where every move is analyzed, every word is examined, every decision becomes a headline, a place where even wearing the wrong outfit can apparently become a national emergency. The world has watched people debate royal clothing like it is a diplomatic treaty. But beyond all that noise, there has always been another side of Harry, the side focused on service, the side that has talked openly about mental health, the side that supported veterans, the side that created Invictus. And that side is exactly what this award is recognizing. Because influence is not only about where you come from, it is about what you do with the platform you have. And that is the difference. A title can open a door. A platform can create attention, but the work is what determines whether people remember you. And Invictus has become part of Harry's legacy, a legacy built around competition, courage, and giving people a stage. And maybe that is why this recognition feels so meaningful, because it is not just about Prince Harry, it is about every person who has stood on an Invictus stage, every athlete who showed that injury did not end their story, every family member who watched someone they love find confidence again, every person who saw those games and thought, maybe I can do more than I thought. That is influence. That is impact. And that is why even a royal correspondent like Chris Shipp can look at the list and say, yes, that makes sense. Because sometimes the simplest answer is the correct one. Someone did something meaningful. Someone changed something. Someone deserves recognition. And in this case, that someone is Prince Harry. And the fascinating thing about this entire conversation is that it exposes a much bigger debate about what society chooses to celebrate. Because for a very long time, there has been this obsession with measuring influence through the loudest possible signals. Who has the biggest following? Who trends the most? Who creates the most headlines? Who causes the biggest arguments online? And yes, unfortunately, the internet has somehow created a world where a person can become famous simply by making everyone else tired. A remarkable achievement in collective exhaustion. But influence in sports has always been more than that. Sports have always been connected to human stories. Behind every medal, every competition, every victory, there is a person. There is a journey. There is a struggle. There is a reason why someone decided to keep going. And that is where Invictus stands apart. The games are not simply about competition. They are about recovery through competition. They are about identity. They are about reminding people that being injured does not erase someone's value. That message has resonated because it touches something universal. Everyone, at some point, faces a moment where life changes unexpectedly. Everyone faces obstacles. Everyone faces setbacks. But the question becomes, what happens next? Invictus was built around that question. What happens next? And the answer has been thousands of athletes showing up, competing, and rewriting the narrative around their own lives. That is why the recognition from Time is significant. Because Time is not simply looking at fame, it is looking at people who shape culture, industries, and conversations. And sport is a massive part of culture. Sport is where communities come together. Sport is where stories are shared. Sport is where people often find belonging. Prince Harry understood that. He understood that sport could be more than entertainment. It could be a tool for healing, a tool for confidence. A tool for connection. And that understanding is what helped create something that continues to grow. Now, what makes the ITV discussion even more interesting is that Charlene White raised a very fair point. There are other members of the royal family connected to sport. There are royals who have played sports. There are royals who attend sporting events. There are royals who have supported different sporting organizations. But Chris Shipp's answer highlights the difference. Harry was not recognized because he showed up. He was recognized because he built something. There is a difference between being present and creating. There is a difference between attending an event and changing the conversation around an entire area of sport. And that distinction is important because if someone creates a platform where thousands of people are given opportunities they may not have otherwise had, that is a contribution. It is not about the surname. It is not about the title. It is about the work. And that is probably why this recognition lands differently. Because for years, Prince Harry has been discussed through the lens of royal drama. Every decision, every interview, every move, everything becomes part of a never-ending debate. Sometimes it feels like people could analyze a cup of tea he drinks and turn it into a 3-hour panel discussion. The Sussex tea incident. What does the mug placement mean? Humanity really knows how to turn a simple object into a conspiracy board. But moments like this force the conversation back to something more concrete. What has he actually done? And the answer is, he created the Invictus Games. He helped elevate adaptive sports. He gave veterans an international platform. He brought attention to stories that often went unheard. Those are tangible things. You can see them, you can measure them, you can point to the athletes and the impact. And that is why the attempt to dismiss it becomes increasingly difficult, because the games exist, the athletes exist, the stories exist, the influence exists. Another important part of this is that Prince Harry's connection to this work did not come from nowhere. His own military background shaped his understanding of service and the challenges faced by veterans. He has spoken many times about the importance of supporting those who have served. But what stands out about Invictus is that it moved beyond words. It became action. And that is where many people see the difference. It is easy to say you care about an issue. It is much harder to build an international organization around it. It requires commitment. It requires partnerships. It requires years of effort. And it requires continuing even when people criticize. That last part matters because anything connected to the royal family attracts attention. Some positive, some negative, some completely dramatic because apparently calm discussions are too boring for the modern media ecosystem. But through all of that, Invictus continued. The athletes continued. The mission continued. And that consistency is part of why the recognition feels earned. Now, there is another layer here. Prince Harry's connection to this work also challenges the idea that influence has to come from traditional places. For generations, sports leadership was often associated with athletes, coaches, executives, or major sporting organizations. But modern sports are changing. Influence can come from people who create movements, people who connect communities, people who expand access, people who change how the world thinks about competition. And that is exactly the category Harry falls into. He is not being honored as the fastest runner. He is not being honored as the person who scored the winning goal. He is being honored as someone who changed what sports could represent. And that is powerful. Because the best sporting moments are not always about the final score. Sometimes they are about the person who never thought they would compete again. Sometimes they're about the crowd watching and realizing they are seeing something bigger than a game. That is the heart of Invictus. And that is why Chris Shipp's reaction matters. Because it was not some dramatic defense. It was not a grand statement. It was simply, yes, this fits. Yes, this makes sense. Yes, this is connected to something real. And sometimes those simple acknowledgments say the most. Because when someone has spent years covering a person, they have seen the patterns. They have seen what lasts. They have seen what disappears. And Invictus has lasted. The noise changes, the headlines change, the debates change, but the work remains. And that is the difference between a moment and a legacy. A moment gets attention. A legacy creates impact. And Prince Harry's Invictus journey has become a major part of that legacy. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Smiley here, and take care.